Hey y'all, welcome to Something's in the Closets. I'm one of your hosts, Wyatt, and I'm joined by my co-host, Aleja. This is possibly our first episode, maybe the second, not exactly sure. I'm Wyatt, you can call me Y. I'm a podcast producer and I love really ooky spooky things. Aleja, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Aleja. I also love spooky things. And I am co-host for this podcast as well as a journalist. So,
So, guys, I'm going to be really awkward because normally I'm used to being on the other side of the microphone. If some of you are coming from my podcast, my old podcast, Horror Buzzed, you know I'm really awkward unless I'm drunk. So, that's not going to be a part of this podcast. That way we can have some serious conversation and debating. And if you want to learn more about us and what this, go to somethingsintheclosetpod.com and we should just get right into it. Okay, so today I'm going to be telling Aleja a story ish, more of a concept, and we're going to determine whether we believe it's fact or fiction. Um, Cue spooky music, and here is the intro. Have you ever been home alone and caught a glimpse of a figure passing by a doorway or down the hall? Perhaps you were awoken from your slumber and saw someone corner, but they disappeared once you turned the light on. Aleja, do you know what we're talking about based on that introduction?
okay. Just because of how relatable that was, I'm going to assume shadow people.
Correct. Ookie spooky shadow people. Do you have any personal experience with shadow people?
I do. I have two. One that's like it still affects me to this day to a certain extent. A second one happened with you at your room.
What? When did that? Was I present?
You were present. I literally told you about it right after it happened, and it's because I pointed out your spooky doll, and I was like, "Oh,
Oh, yeah. I was in the middle of like dyeing my hair. So I was like in a manic episode. I was not paying attention to anything.
yeah." And so that one, I was sitting or I was standing like at your dresser, and I was going through the instructions to dye my own hair, and like out of the corner of my eye, like right next to me, I thought you were standing there. So I thought you came back from the bathroom and I was going to ask you something. So I turned and obviously there was nothing there. And that's when I saw your fucking doll. I was just like, oh shit. And then because it looked like there was a person next to me. Like it just looked like there was a presence right there. And obviously,
Yeah.
like my brain thinks it's you because I was waiting for you to come back. And then I turn around and you just walk out of the bathroom and I was like, okay.
And for the record, my haunted doll, Sarah, is only like 2 feet tall. So she probably wouldn't have been in her peripheral vision. She just likes to make noises for me. I've not seen her shadow form, thankfully.
I don't think it was her shadow form. I think I saw something else. It's just when I turned, that was the first thing I like laid my eyes on. And I remember you telling me about your haunted doll, and I didn't know what she looked like until then.
Yeah, I have three.
Fucking crazy.
Yeah, that's why we're doing this podcast.
So the first one that I like ever saw that I remember vividly, it happened when I was 14 years old. I used to leave my like door open just a bit of like a crack because my cat likes to come in and out. And I woke up at like maybe 5 in the morning, I want to say. I just saw this really tall and like lanky figure just like poking its head into my room. And I was just staring. I think we probably stared at each other for maybe like 10 seconds. And then I heard my mom's bedroom door open and it like pulled back and it just moved away. I don't
I
remember if I
love
fell
that
back
for
asleep or
you.
not. Oh, it was terrifying. But like, here's the thing with that. The next or a couple hours later when I wake up, I go to school and everything. I don't find out till later that night. But I find out that that morning, around the time I saw the figure, my grandfather passed away. So I don't know if it was a shadow. To me, it looked like a shadow person. It like that's how
Mhm.
I remember it. But my grandpa was very tall and very lanky. And I saw this around the time he passed away.
Wow.
So like I
That's
don't
crazy.
yeah, it was terrifying. And like even what I mean by it affects me to this day is like I will not sleep in a room if there is a door like cracked open, whether it be a closet, bathroom, the front door, nothing. Like the doors have to be closed because that just freaked me out so much. Even if it was him, it's just it
Well, yeah.
really spooked me.
Ghost. Ghost
Ghosts,
either way scary.
ghosts
Oh
do
my
be
gosh.
spooky.
Well, I'm glad you have some sort of personal experience with shadow people because we're going to be going over a history and some explanations for what these shadow people are. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first part I'm going to read to you is from a Bustle article by Nina Khan. So what I'm going to be reading now is Nina's words. Sightings of shadow people date back as early as the 1600s Common Era. Descriptions of shadowy human-like figures have appeared in folklore and religious texts throughout history and cultures. Some well-known figures include the supernatural creatures known as jinn of Islamic theology, the shadowy beings known as Nusala Chito of Native American, don't hate me people, Chewacta tribe? And even extraterrestrials. The modernly used shadow people term and the infamous Hat Man were coined by paranormal researcher and book author Heidi Hollis, who claims that shadow people have been around since the beginning of time and usually appear as a dark human-shaped silhouette in our peripheral vision. Do you think that this description by Nina is accurate of shadow people?
Yeah, I would say it is, especially with like the whole historical aspect of it. I mean, there's a reason I feel like people get spooked by seeing a shadow generally. And that probably
Mhm.
just derived from, people seeing shadows that weren't supposed to be there. And that's how we got shadow
Yeah.
people.
Okay. So we're going to get the boring explanation out of the way right away. The scientific explanation for shadow people. This is an article from science.org, Illuminating Shadow People. You're walking down an empty street alone when suddenly you have the eerie feeling that someone's following you. Is your mind playing tricks on you? Maybe so. According to a new study, when a specific region of the brain called the left temporal junction is stimulated, I'm not a scientist, people, it can create the illusion of a shadowy person. Given that such experiences are often heightened in psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia and paranoia, and even in those who believe they've been abducted by aliens, the result could lead to a better understanding of these neurological conditions. The finding emerged by accident. Neurologists Olaf Blank of the Brain Mind Institute in Lausanne, Switzerland, and his colleagues were attempting to identify the source of epileptic seizures in a 23-year-old woman. They applied a mild current through surgically implanted electrodes to various regions of her brain. Not much happened until the researchers stimulated the woman's left TPJ, located roughly above the ear. Suddenly, she reported feeling the presence of a mystery person behind her, a motionless, speechless shadow that imitated her body's postures and actions. He lay beneath her when she lay down, sat behind her when she sat down, and attempted to take a test card from her hand when she participated in a language exercise. Such delusions are similar to those seen in patients with schizophrenia. Schizophrenics often mistake their own bodies to be someone else's. For example, they attribute their own actions to others. They also have frequent illusions of being followed or controlled by a stranger, as do those who claim to have been manipulated by aliens. Blanc says the shadow person phenomenon may shed light on how the brain perceives itself. In order to recognize its own body, he says, the brain uses sensory information, such as visual and perceptive cues, which indicate the position of body parts relative to each other and everything else. The TBJ is known to put some of these cues together. When the function is disrupted, the brain perceives two bodies instead of one and mistakes the second for that of a stranger. It's a valid idea, says neurologist Juan Sina of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston, but this might be just one of many mechanisms that generate such hallucinations. So, now that we got the boring part out of the way, what do you think about the scientific explanation?
I, mm, to some degree, I see where they're coming from, especially when it talks about schizophrenia and paranoia. Um,
Mm-hmm.
those are two, I suppose you could say, mental illnesses that really do affect a person's mind heavily. I would agree with it if it wasn't so many people seeing this kind of, like, so many everyday people who are, they don't have schizophrenia, they don't have paranoia, they just see something and they're just like, okay. Like, I even have had friends and family members who are skeptics, and they've admitted to seeing like a shadow person, and they won't say it's a ghost or anything or say it's a shadow person. They'll just say, I don't understand, I don't know what it was, but I did see it, and I'm sure there's a logical explanation for it that I just don't have right now. So because there's people like that out there, I don't really think the science explanation really tells the full reason or story of why we see these things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even in their description of what happened to the woman, where they manipulated her brain through electrodes, it wasn't exactly the same thing as seeing a shadow person. She was seeing like two arms that were directly behind hers, and one was a stranger, right? When people see shadow people, it's not necessarily attached to their body. It can be feet away from them. And that's my one issue with the findings of that study.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I said with my grandfather's sighting, I was probably like around, I want to say he was maybe 6 to 7 feet away from me. I was in bed and he was at my door, supposedly. I don't know if it was him, but that's where I saw this shadow figure. It wasn't attached to me. It was in no means close to me, and it moved on its own. I remember when my mom, or I think it was my mom, who came out of her bedroom door, I never moved because I was so scared just staring at it. But when she came out, it moved.
Mm-hmm.
So it moved of its own volition. I didn't move. So that's kind of where I'm like, I don't know how this sign, the whole thing with the woman really holds up when you see something like that.
Everyone at some point in their life has been afraid of the dark. It's a common fear. And it's known that our eyes can play tricks on us when it's dark. A pile of dirty laundry can easily become a figure sitting in a chair, and a tree outside can become a claw. But it's important to note that most shadow person sightings appear in the peripheral vision, which our peripherals are designed to detect motion and movement, but not detail. So that could be why we see just a blob at the side of our eyes. So, Aleja, I want to play a video for you. I'm just going to play the audio so you can hear and our listeners can hear it.
I'm Corinne Pertil. This is Quartz. Subscribe to our channel for more videos. The vision is virtually the same everywhere. I collected accounts from forums, chat rooms, books, and interviews, and noticed a few common themes. He is dark. He is featureless. He wears a hat. And when people see him, they feel paralyzed, unable to speak, a crushing sense of breathlessness is pressed on their chests. And when they're finally able to move, he's gone.
I haven't seen him in years, but I fear him. I do for sure.
I wanted to speak to someone who could make sense of all of this.
I think it is a real challenge for the kind of scientific explanations to explain why things seem to crop up time and time again.
Chris is a psychologist who studies paranormal experiences. He says people who see things like the Hat Man aren't crazy or lying. That fear and that vision is real. but the explanation has a lot more to do with culture than ghosts.
If you look at the way it's interpreted across different cultures, that's absolutely fascinating because you've got the same core experience, but it's kind of got this cultural overlay.
Bueno, aunque la gente me dice que esto es algo, dice que es natural, de un trastorno del sueño y todas esas cosas, pero otra cosa es que uno lo viva, lo sienta, porque para mí eso es algo espiritual, digamos, son ataques demoníacos, digamos.
This nightmarish figure has inspired art and myths across cultures and history. In Assyria and Babylon, an evil spirit was said to lead victims as they slept. In ancient Greece, a doctor wrote of a demon that visited his patients at night and pressed upon their chests. Similar specters appear in folktales told from the Arctic to Japan to Newfoundland. And for most of history, no one knew why. By the late 20th century, the science of sleep evolved to offer another explanation. It's called sleep paralysis.
You're stuck in a state. You're awake, but the only thing you can do is move your eyes, breathe.
Alon Avedon is the director of the Sleep Disorders Center at UCLA. He says we're always paralyzed while we dream. That's normal. But when the brain wakes up before the body does, that's sleep paralysis.
You cannot scream, you cannot talk.
In fact, a lot of people experience sleep paralysis, and it can come with terrifying visions. Sleep scientists have a specific term for this.
One unique parasomnia is called terrifying hypnagogic hallucinations. What happens is the patient wakes up and they start seeing images of other people who are trying to hurt them.
But even Avedon says he doesn't understand why all those hallucinations are so similar.
It's fascinating in that you take individuals across different geographic entities, and yet the dreams seem to be similar. Why does it happen? Why are the dreams not pleasant?
Chris, the psychologist, thinks he might have an idea. Sleep paralysis visions are shaped by cultural influences the dreamer may not even be consciously aware of. For example, that man in the hat looks an awful lot like a figure we've come to associate with horror.
Who the hell is that?
The Hat Man, when I sat and thought about it, the thing that came to my mind was Freddy Krueger and the kind of street films were actually directly inspired by sleep paralysis. This notion that you can be attacked when you're asleep, that's when you're vulnerable. And of course, Krueger wears a hat.
There's still no definitive answer for why some people see these shadowy visitors. But those who do don't have to be haunted by them forever.
Treatment for this is to have the patient relive and re-experience the hallucination during wakefulness, during the day, and begin to imagine positive emotions or associate positive emotions with that image.
In truth, there is no spirit lurking in the corners of our rooms at night. The Hat Man is only in our minds, and that may be even scarier.
So, do you have any thoughts about the journalist at Quartz News had to say about shadow people?
None other. Well, actually, okay. Here's the thing. So I think what was said was pretty accurate. If anything, actually more terrifying than anything I've actually heard about shadow people. Especially about the Hat Man.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I don't know, that struck something in me that I've never really heard about that. You know, I've always
About
heard
the Hat Man?
generically. Yeah, I've never actually really heard about the Hat Man, but they were describing some symptoms
wow.
that I've experienced before. Like, I don't know. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. There was this time when I lived alone, my junior year of college, and you know this, I've lived alone by myself for a while. I'm pretty comfortable living alone. There's nothing that really scares me. It might be a bad thing, but it's fine. And there was this one night when I went to bed, everything was normal, you know, I got my stuff ready for the next day and I went to bed. I don't know what it was, but I woke up and I just felt like someone was watching me, and I knew I had a bad dream of some sort. But when I woke up, it felt like the dream hadn't ended. especially because I couldn't move. I was just like just laying there. Like I felt kind of dead. I could look around my room and stuff, but that was about it. And I just felt like somebody was in the room watching me, and it took me forever to try to get out of that state. I don't remember if I saw anything, but I know that when I got out of that state, I have never felt more scared, like ever. There has never been a time in my life where I felt scared than that night. And I don't know if like maybe the hat man was in my room and I just didn't see him. But the feelings that were associated with him, I feel like I felt that night.
Mm-hmm. I can't believe you haven't heard of the Hat Man before. He's my favorite cryptid.
I know he is, and I wanted to ask you about him. I didn't know we'd be talking about him today. So now I can ask you about him.
Yeah, so during that video, I thought that it was really interesting that the psychologist linked the Hat Man with Freddy Krueger. And
Ooh.
but what I have to say is there have been sightings of a Hat Man before the 80s when Nightmare on Elm Street came out. At least so they say. So I'm not exactly thinking that Freddy Krueger has molded consciousness of people in order to have a shadow person take the form for thousands of people all over the world. I don't think that's accurate, but I thought it was an interesting comparison. I'm lucky enough to never have seen the Hat Man. The only shadow person I've seen, which if you guys want to see that story, it is on our About page on our website, somethingsintheclosetpod.com. And it just stood there, you know, it didn't really do much. And it did not have a hat. I feel like for some reason, if it had a hat, it would make me think it's more of like a person. More scared. So now I want to go into some explanations. And again, we're going to be referencing an article from liveabout.com. It's called Explanation for the Shadow People Phenomenon. So the first thing they have listed is a figment of the imagination, which is the most readily available explanation for shadow people sightings. I think it's kind of a cop-out to say that it's just a figment of your imagination for every single people who have had like prolonged experiences with these shadows people, like minutes, not just a couple of seconds out of the corner of your eye. What do you think about the figment of imagination explanation?
I think it's bullshit because listen, it's so easy for anybody to just say, "Oh, it was just a figment of your imagination." Like there's some
Just like a gaslighting man.
That's exactly what it is. Like when somebody tells me that it was a figment of my imagination, my immediate thought is, I'm being gaslit right now, and I don't like it. So yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that explanation because I think it's bullshit. That's not an explanation. That's an excuse for not having an explanation.
That's exactly on the same page. So the next explanation they have written down is ghosts, which I could see, but having a like shadow, like a solid looking shadow, I feel like that's going to have to be one powerful ghost because most of the time apparitions are like incomplete, very translucent, and they're mostly like white light rather than solid darkness. Do you think it could be ghosts?
Well, so based on like my own personal experience, you know, the stuff with possibly seeing my grandfather, I've always wanted to believe that maybe they were ghosts because that seems like a logical explanation if you believe in ghosts. If you don't, then you think it's bullshit, but that's not my problem. So if you believe in ghosts, shadow people being ghosts is a very logical explanation. I mean, like I said, I saw this figure possibly around the time my grandfather died, and me and him were very, very close. However, I can 100% understand why people would say that perhaps this isn't a ghost and it's entirely something different because of the fact that there's ghosts that are like, you know, like you said, white light, or not even full body apparitions. Sometimes they just come voices in like the radio or something. Or sometimes you just see like a mist or whatever. But with shadow people, it's literally what it is. It's a shadowy person, like they're black, essentially, like this black, figure. So I'm a little on and off about it. I'm on it for it being ghost because of my personal experience, but I do see the other side.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Their next explanation is demonic entities or other spirits. So I definitely feel, because a lot of these experiences with shadow people are negative, and so I wouldn't be surprised if they were actually some sort of manifestation of demons, or if you don't believe in, like demons or angels, some sort of entity that exists, not in our everyday world. I feel like that would make a lot of sense. It's like intent to hurt you. And I know across history there have been tales of demons associated with this, like the night hag who would sit on your chest and you couldn't breathe, which is another common association with sleep paralysis. I really feel like that could be the explanation here. But what do you think about it being demons?
It's kind of the same standing that I have with ghosts because it would be illogical. I mean, from what we, I guess, know or believe about demons, we can kind of see them as very powerful beings because they've never actually had life. As far as I know, that's how they're described. They're these beings that never like lived, and because of that, they have this sort of power. So it makes sense for them to have this power to manifest as these like full body apparitions, like ghosts, as we believe can. So I definitely see that. I think because they're malevolent, because they have this reputation, that they very well could be demons.
Okay, so far you're for ghosts and demons. The next explanation here has to do with out of body experiences and astral projection. So they say that with this explanation, it's saying that basically the shadow people we're seeing is the consciousness of a person who is currently astral projecting, which I don't think would be the case, just because I don't know about you, but I feel like most people don't have the ability to see the astral plane. Unless when we're in that dreamy awake state, somehow we can see past the fabric of our reality and into that plane. I'm really against the astral bodies. What do you think?
I agree with you. I mean, I feel like if it's on the astral plane or whatever, that would insinuate that more of us know how to astral project than we think. I mean, I've never done it. I hear of people doing it and like their experiences when they do it. Not anybody I know personally, but like you see shit on the internet. But yeah, just because I don't think the general population does it, it just doesn't make any sense. Like it just
Right.
It's not something we all do unless we do actually do it unconsciously, and we don't have any proof that we do it unconsciously. So it's really
well, it could be like what do you call it? The Insidious movies where that little boy Dalton didn't know, but he was astral projecting and he ended up with the demons and the ghosts. I know it's just a movie, but in that movie, unknowingly.
That could be. You know what that reminded me? Because you brought up a movie. Have you ever seen The Haunting of Hill House?
No, I've only seen Haunting of Bly Manor.
Okay, so Haunting of Hill House was actually the first one to come out. It's not like connected or anything. It was just made by the same people, essentially, from what I know. In The Haunting of Hill House, one of the characters, she actually sees something that she calls the crooked neck lady. And this is actually spoilers. Do you want a spoiler?
I saw the last episode. My parents watched it.
Okay, so anyway, so This is a spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it and wants to see it. So if you don't want to see it, or if you do want to see it, I recommend skipping it. So she grew up seeing this crooked neck lady. That's what she would call it, and it was just a shadowy figure, but it looked like a shadowy figure of a woman with a crooked neck, and it actually caused her like severe sleep paralysis. I believe she started going to like a sleep disorder specialist for it because whenever she had sleep paralysis, she would see the crooked neck lady. Near the end of the series, though, we find out that the crooked neck lady was actually a future version of herself that she was seeing because she committed
Mm,
suicide in her old haunted house, and that's how she got her crooked neck. So I
that's
kind of feel like that falls
trippy.
on the realm. Yeah, it's a very confusing thing, but that kind of falls on the realm of like astral projecting. Like, I think I've seen some theories saying that she was astral projecting and seeing her future. She just didn't know it.
Or it could have something to do with this next explanation, which would kind of make sense. The next explanation is time travelers.
I've heard of that one.
So, with this explanation, they think that beings from the future are traveling back to our time um, to observe the events of our timeline. And who knows if they're here to influence things. Um, but they might only have the ability to come here in the form of a shadow. Like maybe they're not fully able to come back all the way. And that's why they're appearing as these shadowy beings, which I think is really interesting because I've never ever thought that a shadow person was a time traveler before. That's just so, to me, that's sci-fi, not paranormal. And in my mind, those are two different things. But with this one, it kind of mashes them together.
That's a good point. I feel like, well, I mean, I feel like paranormal is just simply stuff we don't understand yet. And, time travel is one of those things. Um,
Yeah.
so like I feel like they could be time traveling and we see them as shadowy figures, and we're ignorant about time travel right now. So we just ultimately assume, you know what, ghosts, or you know what, demons. We don't have an explanation for
With
what
our
we're
feeble
seeing.
minds.
Oh yeah, we don't know shit. If they're from the future, we know nothing. We are essentially cavemen.
So this one would make sense. And the more I think about it, like, especially with everyone seeing the Hat Man, it could just be one individual who's happening to wear a hat, but so many people are seeing him because it's his job to observe them and see what they're doing. Maybe he's scanning their dreams or taking notes of how the human body rests. Maybe they're not our species. And maybe that's also why they're appearing as shadows, scare people even further. I don't know.
It's
This
easier
one
for them to
seems
hide.
really interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's dark. They're a dark shadow. I mean, who
Yeah.
knows? It's
It's
really,
easier for
really
people to
interesting.
just chalk it up to being a shadow. It's just being like, oh, it's just a shadowy person. Like, oh, it's someone else's
Mhm.
shadow or something.
So is interdimensional beings, which is really cool also if you think about it, because I've heard that sometimes when you see a shadow person or even ghosts, that it's actually in the location that you're in or the time that you're in, the veil between two different dimensions and timelines are thin and you're able to see through it. So that shadow person standing in your doorway could just be someone who lives in that house in a different timeline, who is just, standing there because it's their house and they're doing something. And I think it's this one's really, really interesting, but it also has to do with the jinn of Islamic culture, because they're also interdimensional beings who live on a different plane. So this also ties in with that. But it's so interesting that we all can exist in the same place, but our worlds are moving at like different speeds, different vibrations, to where we don't physically exist together, but we're in the same space. What do you
That's
think?
confusing, but like, oh my god, that's such a confusing. It's such a confusing thing to talk about. I understand what you're saying, but yeah, I kind of think that if I had to lean towards specific, explanations, I feel like that one could be one that's a little bit more plausible than the rest, simply because of how much we don't know about the world around us. Like, we think we do. That doesn't mean we do. And there's other like cryptids outside of shadow people that people believe could be an interdimensional being, such as Bigfoot, which we can talk about that in an entirely different podcast episode. But like, I have heard theories about Bigfoot being an interdimensional being because of how people
I have
just
not.
they see him
Wow.
and then he's gone.
Mhm.
Like, he's
Yeah.
never really in one space, and that's why nobody can essentially catch him, because he's just constantly coming in and out. And these shadow people could be that too, or hell, a lot of paranormal stuff in our world could actually just be explained by interdimensional, crossover.
I will add this. Dimensional beings in their writing, they say some theorize the vibrations of our existence are beginning to mesh with those of another dimension, which accounts for the increase in phenomena as ghost, shadow people, and aliens. So that's kind of scary. I do want to see their source for this, though. This is their words, not mine. It's really interesting, though. Like, it could really explain all of it. Like cryptids, like Mothman could just be like what a person in a different dimension.
Yeah.
Just
I love
ripped
that
as
idea.
fuck, but an ugly face.
No, I love the idea of another dimension where everybody looks like Moth. That makes me really happy for some reason. I don't know why. It just sounds wholesome.
So the next explanation is aliens. So because a lot of people who experience sleep paralysis sometimes experience it as alien abduction. Some people think that all sleep paralysis and shadow people are actually aliens. And so this explanation can kind of go hand in hand with the time travelers, like they're coming and observing. And they don't know how to, look like humans. So they're just presenting themselves as a shadowy dark figure without any detail. That is scary, but for some reason it scares me less if it's aliens, because if they wanted and they had the technology and they're already in your bedroom, like if they wanted to hurt you, they would. Like,
yeah, I agree.
So that is all of the explanations from this article. What do you think overall of shadow people as a phenomena?
I think that shadow people are something that everybody experiences, whether they want to believe it or not. It's just different people are willing to acknowledge that they've seen something over other people who, just simply don't want to believe in that kind of thing. And that's totally fair. I think that there's obviously a lot of different explanations for them. And I think it could be chalked up to people's personal beliefs. If you believe in God or, some higher power, you're more likely to probably believe that it could be a ghost or it could be demons. So personally, I have such an open mind to this kind of stuff that I actually don't really know if I can chalk it up to one single explanation. I think personally, based on my own experiences, I don't want to say it was a ghost simply because I don't want to believe that that's like the last time I saw my grandfather. And the fact that so many people see them being malicious towards them or have malicious, things happen to them because of shadow people. I don't think it's ghosts. I think it's more likely to be demons or interdimensional beings that could possibly just be wanting to fuck with us.
I mean, honestly, if I was one of them, I'd probably do the same thing. Like, but
Oh yeah.
I'm fucked in the head. Yeah, okay. So I have two theories. So the first one, I think that, overall we have a collective consciousness as a species, and I think it could be something that exists within that consciousness, and that appears when people are in distress. And that's a little bit of meta psychology. So that could be one explanation. But the other, I think that they're just entities that we don't know, because some shadow people don't hurt you or don't scare you. So I feel like they're like people. There's good people and there's bad people. So I don't think necessarily they would be demons. I think that they could just be a different version of intelligent life that we just can't see. Maybe they evolved differently. Maybe they don't exist in this dimension. But like, I don't think it's demons or aliens or even ghosts, because I think ghosts show themselves in different ways. I feel like maybe this species or entity can get confused for a lot of other things because of how undetailed they are. I don't think there's any one answer, but I think that it's a real phenomenon overall. I think it's real. It's really happening. I don't think it's a figment of someone's imagination.
Oh, same. I don't think it's fake or anybody's making up seeing this kind of shit. And I think anybody who says it's just a figment of your imagination is bullshit. So there's obviously something happening going on if you've seen a shadow person, We can't all have experienced or seen, there can't be this many people who have experienced and seen this kind of stuff for it to not be acknowledged as a phenomena or something that, should be talked about. It shouldn't be blown off, because if it was all in our imaginations, then why are we all seeing it?
Exactly. So if you guys are listening on Spotify, there should be a poll that pops up, or it's in the bottom. You can tell us if you think it's aliens, ghosts, demons, time travelers, or if you think it's bullshit. There's no right or wrong answer. You tell us what you think. Again, this is for Spotify, so if you're not listening on Spotify, I'm sorry. It's only a feature available on there. Thank you so much for listening to our first episode of Something's in the Closet. If you want to support us, you can go to somethingsintheclosetpod.com, click donate in the top right hand corner, or if you'd rather get something for your money, you can hit merch and buy a hoodie or a tank top. Have any money to give, that's okay too. You can follow us on Instagram at Something's in the Closet, or on TikTok at Something's in the Closet. We're trying to get monetized. You guys can also review us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We'd love a 5-star review. And if you want to submit any of your paranormal stories or suggestions, you can go ahead and do that at hello@somethingsintheclosetpod.com. For this episode, I sourced from Ghostly Podcast, episode 6, Shadow People. What are shadow people? The explanation is beyond creepy by bustle.com. Illuminating Shadow People by science.org. Hatman nightmares and sleep paralysis are happening around the world by Quartz News. And explanations for shadow people from liveabout.com.